I'm Mark Moody Stuart. I was born in the Caribbean in a small island called Antigua, where my mother's family had been for generations, and I still have a lot of family there. I was educated in Britain in my secondary education. I'm a geologist, so I did a doctorate in geology. I think having been born on a sugar plantation, so a natural resource industry, and then working in the oil and gas industry, subsequently the mining industry, I've had the pleasure of seeing developments based on resource industries and the very positive impacts that this can have if the proceeds and the development is positively executed, particularly the use of the proceeds, but also the negative impact. I mean, I'm a great believer in the original Brundtland definition of sustainability, which is to meet the needs of the present while not compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. And basically, if you look at a natural resource industry, even an industry like the oil and gas industry, you're taking a natural resource and should be converting it into other forms of resources. And if you do that well, it's very positive, and if you don't do it well, somebody steals the proceeds, it's extremely negative. So I think it's how you actually progress the development. Now, in addition, for the last 20 years, so in my case a bit more, 25, we've known that the product of fossil fuels has a negative effect on the climate. So that's an additional accelerator, as it were. I mean, we always knew that we would never use all the resources, all the fossil resources that they exist. That there would be other technologies before then. And that would take place normally in a smooth process of technological advancement. Unfortunately, we have an accelerating requirement, so we need to give that side of it an extra push. They face the challenge that all oil and gas resource holders face, from Venezuela to Argentina, which is that the emphasis is going to be in future, needs to be in low cost and lower carbon. And if you look at that, and lower carbon means lower processing costs for the crude, so you don't spend a whole lot of money upgrading very heavy, high sulfur crude. And Venezuela's reserves are very much in heavy oil, and that the market for heavy oil is not, will be declining probably. So in expense terms, of course, a lot of Brazil's resources are the pre-salt, which is offshore, deep water, potentially expensive, but costs can be brought down. Argentina, I think, has excellent prospects because I think the crude that they produce is light, will be through shale, will be light crude. Natural resource holders face the same challenge as all the major oil companies, and it's a very difficult challenge because we know there's a transition. I think almost anybody, whether they place the emphasis on climate or not, realizes there will be a technological change. For how long and how do you use the hydrocarbon resources? And people get very excited about the speed of transition of electric vehicles and so on. And China, I think, will play a big role in that. But how long, at what point does global demand for hydrocarbons, which is still rising, so it's about 100 million barrels a day, does it turn over at 105, 110, 115, and when? Now, I personally think that we're probably only a couple of million barrels a day off a turnover, but that there will be a long flat period. And we need to, because oil fields have a natural decline of several percent a year, you have to keep adding, working to keep the same production. So even if it was flat, you would still have to have new production to replace the production which was declining. But it's a very difficult balance, and for international oil companies, you also have the balance between how much investment do you put in alternative energy, and what sorts of alternative energy? Where do you have the skills? And historically, of course, most major industries have found it quite difficult to convert to a complete new form of, although the oil industry's done it quite successfully in the past, but that was not a completely new form, it was a change of approach. Peak demand is real.
Is real,
yes.
And then that means that the heavier the oil, the higher the cost in extraction, the more likely that.
Well, it's both cost and carbon content, because if you believe Saudi Arabia, for example, we are actually marketing production as being the lowest carbon content production. So if you look at China's imports from all around the world, the production with the lowest embedded carbon comes from Saudi Arabia. And it's interesting that begins to be a marketing point. So if I was running a major oil company at the moment, and you had a choice of exploration, or you would look at the gravity, how light the crude was, because lighter is better, more gassy, they're all switching to gas, and also sulfur content, how much sulfur do you have to take out of the stuff. No, I read somewhere that the US has, I don't know, 250 electric buses. The European Union has 2,500-ish, and China has 420,000. And there's the learning curve that you get from making these things. I think the most interesting thing China is doing, and I'm quite passionate about this, is looking at hydrogen. Because hydrogen, I believe, is a key. In my days in Shell, we had a hydrogen division. I think it doesn't exist anymore. The idea was to begin to develop a hydrogen network so you could have hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. Now, the question is, where do you get the hydrogen from? And if you look at a future with very high percentages of renewable energy in it, if you want, say, 50% renewable energy, the higher you go, the more storage you need. And battery storage is expensive. And you will have, at times of, when you're investing in renewable energy, if you aim for, say, 30%, you will over-invest for times when the wind is not blowing so strongly and the sun is a bit cloudy. So at other times you will have excess, so you will have curtailment and when you've got that, the renewable energy is actually free. and you can convert it into hydrogen. And the process of converting it by electrolysis from water is not desperately efficient. It doesn't matter so much if the surplus energy is free. There's only one, basically probably only one company in the world, a transportation company, light vehicles, which believes in hydrogen, and that's Toyota. And I always say, never bet against Toyota, because look at hybrids. They started that, and the Americans all said, nah, it'll never work. You know, now they're going for it. Same thing with hydrogen. Yeah, I think so. I mean, the big energy companies have, they have skills in big project management. And if you want to convert a society to more sustainable energy, whether it's through storage or carbon capture and storage or whatever, you need integration and you need trading. So I think the smart ones are going into electricity grids and so on. I think the disadvantage that the West has, or the advantage that it could have, is that you need a big market with no barriers. The United States is obviously a big market with no barriers between it, but they're at the moment on officially the administration is on not on that tack at all. The Chinese have a big market, and they are moving electrons, electricity, long distances, several thousand kilometers, using ultra-high voltage DC. Interestingly, the technology is actually ABB technology. I visited State Grid and wondered at these 8 or 9 major lines across China at ultra-high voltage DC. And subsequently, with Saudi Aramco, we visited ABB. And we were going to have a demonstration of this, and I was all ready with my question, saying, you guys say you're a leader, but I've sat in State Grid and seen them.
Yeah.
And they said, yes, but that's our technology.
But they've got the standard, the Chinese have got the standards now, right? For
yes, and they also have the capacity to build these things. In the United States, you desperately need long-range electricity transmission, but it'll be very difficult across states. In Europe, you know, one could dream that we might have it. In Latin America, I think you probably could do, starting in, Chile is such a great example, because they've got high insulation in the north and high wind in the south, and you've just got to bring them together and you live happily ever after. And they've got lithium.
They've got lithium as well.
Well, the main challenge, I think, in all energy transitions is cost and convenience. I mean, if you look at the transitions that we've had in the past in energy, if you go back to the previous century or the beginning of the 20th century, we basically had coal, oil, wood, and someone pointed out to me once, also biofuels in the form of oats for the horses, which were used at the time. By the end of the 20th century, we had a multiple of things. So coal had gradually been replaced initially by fuel oil, so ships didn't have folk shoveling, they had a tank full of fuel oil, which was a byproduct of lighter fuels. And then gradually, natural gas came in, and natural gas backed out fuel oil, so the oil industry, being smart, took the heavy fuel oil and stuck hydrogen on it and made it into light fuel oil, into light fuels. So now a modern refinery produces essentially no fuel oil, produces a bit of asphalt into which we put all the sticky stuff, and then we put it on the roads, which is a good place to get rid of it. So transitions have happened not because of climate, but because of convenience and cost. So whereas people in this country used to heat their houses with coal, they switched to fuel oil and then to gas, and also electricity, although electricity was expensive. And they'll certainly switch to electricity when it's cheaper and easier than gas, because who wants either a mains connection or although that's quite convenient. So I think that the trick is cost and convenience. But it does, on a large scale, require a certain amount of regional planning. And I think you could get that in Latin America. And if you're going to have transitions to more electric vehicles, and you need reliable electricity supplies. Now, I don't know, it would be interesting to count how many countries in Latin America you have essentially guaranteed continuous power supply, never have a power cut. It's quite high, I would think. And in comparison, so I think reliability of electricity supply, if you leave aside Venezuela, Chile has reliability issues. But in general, the supply is more reliable. If you go to Africa, I think you're in a different league. So, and you cannot imagine a world in which you have growth in Africa. It's going to take a long time before people are going to rely on charging their electric vehicle.
So we're talking
So
about...
I think that the growth in, and that's the uncertainty in the future demand, in peak demand, because the growth will come from developing countries, and will those developing countries develop in the old style using fossil fuels, or will they develop using more modern forms of energy? And I would think Latin America has a clear lead in that over Africa, because you have some sophisticated economy. So it's up to businesses, I think, to see the investment opportunities, but then to develop them in a way which contributes to a long-term positive future.